I'll repeat that. Thank you for coming. I'm Joe Pomelovitz, the town manager in Hamilton. With us tonight we have Peter Calderazzo from Dewberry Engineering, which is the town's water consultants, and they were the folks that did the study work. We also have our DPW director, Tim Olson, and Wayne Castingway from the Ipswich River Watershed, which was one of our partners in the study. I'm not the expert, these folks are, so I'm going to turn it over to Peter to give a presentation. Please hold questions until the end. I think it'll make it easier to get through. It's about a 45-minute presentation, and then we can take questions at the end. Okay. Thanks, Angel.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. So tonight's presentation is just on the results of the WMA grant study we did on the regional evaluation to improve the water supply resiliency in the lower Ipswich River watershed for both Hamilton and the other partner communities. But just a quick agenda. We'll go over the study overview, each one of the major tasks that we had as part of the grant study, and then the final report and summary. And as Joe said, we'll have questions and answers at the end of the program. There's like 52 slides, so I'll try to keep it moving. If I start to go too fast, please let me know. I tend to talk a little too fast. So the grant is an overview of the study. So there were 5 partner communities involved in the study. Hamilton, obviously, Wenham, Ipswich, Essex, Manchester, and Totfield. Also, the Salem Valley Water Supply Board had a central role in this project, in the study. We also work hand in hand with the 7,000 North Shore Task Force, who's also looking at long-term goals and solutions for the region as well. So the study goals were to evaluate alternate supply sources and possible WMA surplus withdrawals. WMA's Water Management Act. That's the governs how much towns can pull out of their wells. So we looked at any surplus withdrawals available to Hamilton and the parking water systems to alleviate some of the short-term and long-term water supply shortages. And also, we wanted to identify impacts from sharing that supply in our surplus with respect to permitting, water quality, system operations, and any needed infrastructure. So as the agenda said, so the grant study was separated into 6 tasks. Task 1 was a team meetings, project management. Task 2 was data collection. Task 3 was assessing a connection with Salem Valley Water Supply Board. Task 4 was an assessment of a new connection with Manchester. Task 5 was evaluating the feasibility of the partner community sharing water between each other on an mutual basis. And Task 6 was the final report, which this presentation is actually based on. So all the information in Task 6 report is really here. So just to give a brief overview of the study funding. So the grant, the funding source allocation, the grant, the town was able to get $107,000 through the WMA grant study program to complete the study. The town provided an in-kind match of $47,495. Some of that was cash. The other part was just in-kind services provided by Tim and the other partner water systems, and as well as Wayne Hopefield. And then, so we got the NTP in February 17th, the schedule of the deliverables. You can see there, so the final task report had to be done by the end of June, which didn't obviously give us a lot of time to get this done, but we managed to get it done. So the first, so I didn't really go over the task 1 and 2, it's really just project meetings and data collection, all the information could be presented in here really. So we're going to start off with the task 3 overview. So task 3 was to evaluate a supply connection with the Salem Valley Water Supply Board. So a brief scope was to review their water supply system, evaluate options for connecting Hamilton with the Salem Valley Water Supply Board system, review of some of the water supply permitting considerations, quick review of their authorized withdrawals versus water needs to see what's available surplus that we could share by use, review of the water quality impacts from blending the 2 sources, and also looking at infrastructure upgrades needed to get the water from Salem Valley into Hamilton. There is no direct connection with Salem Valley Water Supply Board at the time, so obviously to get that supply we needed a pipeline to connect. So in the study we evaluated 3 pipeline options. Option A was a 12-inch ductile line water main from Cabot Street in Beverly up to Topsfield Road and through Wenham and eventually coming into Hamilton on Howard Street. Option B was kind of following the same route, except we came up, once into Hamilton, we came up a road. And option C was looking at connecting from the Grapevine Road in Wenham. Right now, Salem Beverly Water is in Wenham and feeds the Gordon College. So this connection, we take it from there, we're bringing it to Hamilton up on the Woodbury Street side. And that's just an overview showing the route. I don't have a pointer, but so this red line is, this is where we're connecting to Beverly, coming in through Wenham into Hamilton, and then here we kind of split. That's option A, that's option B, and then option C was on that road over there. So based on that pipe, so for each of the options, we conducted hydraulic analyses to determine what supply rates we can bring into the system and what impacts they may have on the operation of the Hamilton system. So we look at all three under two different scenarios. One, using Salem Beverly to kind of supplement Hamilton supply, keeping that active and seeing what we can get into the Hamilton's system. And scenario two was fully being supplied by Salem Beverly with Hamilton's system offline and see what that difference would be. So the two systems are at different hydraulic gradients, so Salem Beverly operates a little bit higher. So for that supply to come into Hamilton and maintain the storage tank and the system operations, we would need a DRV to kind of make, to match Hamilton's gradients. So for scenario one, based on the analysis we did, we could deliver flow rates of up to 300 gallons a minute into Hamilton. For options A and B, and for option C, which would be the one that was on the far end, only 200 gallons a minute. And that's for keeping Hamilton's supply still active, so that's just to supplement the supply. Scenario two, we could get supply rates actually up to 600 gallons a minute, which would be fully supplied from Salem Beverly, and Hamilton's current system, the wells, and would be offline, so that'd be totally dependent on Salem Beverly. And under scenario two, we noted that under option C, there was some impacts to available fire protection in the system. They were reduced. So for that scenario, we need to do some additional improvements into the system to kind of improve that fire protection. And for scenario number two, which is the fully supplied off of Salem Beverly, we would need a new pump station as well, because Hamilton's future supply needs, which get to in a second, are more than 600 gallons a minute. So to get more than that, we'd have to pump into the system. And this is just an overview, a cost table of each one of the options. Just kind of showing for each scenario what the cost would be to get the pipeline and the PRV and the meters in place to get water from Salem Beverly into Hamilton. We can go through the cost later. Well, option A, I think was about 7 million. Option A, option B was about 7.8 million. Still pretty close. Option C was a little less, but again, that option didn't really. It had a little more impact on the system operations, and we probably need some additional infrastructure upgrades to kind of make that feasible. So based on that, option A was recommended as the preferred pipeline option, with option B as an alternate. Both options provide similar gravity flow into Hamilton under the current conditions, and also would be able to supply Hamilton fully if and when that is decided to do. We will need some additional investigation on each of the pipeline routes. This study, we didn't do any survey or really detailed inspection of the streets, so one might be more advantageous depending on the amount of utilities in the street or the traffic impact. So that'll be determined, but the routes are pretty close in cost and length. So after looking at that, we assessed the Salem Beverly water supply conditions. So Salem Beverly Water has a registered WMA withdrawal of 10.17 MGD from the Ipswich River Basin. They also have a permitted to withdraw an additional 2.27 MGD, which they have not used and have never used yet to date. So the current average day demands and max day demands are 8.9 and 16. So their average is less than what they are allowed to withdraw. And we looked at the DCR did some water need forecasts, and these numbers here, future average day and max day, are 9.5 and 17. So based on their future, current and future water needs and their WMA withdrawals, right now there's there would be a surplus of 0.67 MGD available, which could supplement Hamilton. Almost half their supply, if not more so. And if that's only using their current registered withdrawals. If they decide to activate their permanent withdrawal, then there would be a surplus of 2.94 MGD, which is pretty substantial. And this is just an overview of the Hamilton and Parking Water Systems supply needs. I won't read each one, but so the combined future supply needs of the whole group, the whole study systems, is 3.65 MGD, and their max stated demand is 9.03. So, so based on the estimated surplus that Salem Valley would have if they activated their permanent withdrawal of 2.94, they could surely have enough supply to satisfy Hamilton's needs, as well as probably supplement the other Parking Water Systems. As I said before, they have never activated that permanent allocation, so doing so would trigger some regulatory conditions and some requirements that they would impose on them. So we have to talk to Mass DEP and see kind of what exactly those requirements are, and Salem Valley would want to do that. And that's probably one of the recommendations that we have to talk with them on that. The only issue at this point is that even though Salem Valley, based on their withdrawals, has a surplus, their current capacity is limited by their plant operations. So right now, their treatment plant that serves both Salem and Beverly has a maximum capacity of 16 million gallons per day. It was originally designed for 24, but due to water quality regulations they have to meet, they can only run it at 16. So as we said earlier, their maximum day right now is 16, so the plant's really running at full board to kind of meet their demands. So under those heavy demand periods, they wouldn't have any surplus available. They're using everything that they have because of the plant, as we said that day. So, however, they could supplement Hamilton and others during the off-peak demands when the demand is less than 10 megawatts per day. So, in talking with Salem Beverly, so they have their capital sustainability plan. So they're looking to upgrade the plant right now. They're looking to spend $50 million of upgrades over the next 10 years, and that will bring their plant back up to its original 24 MGD. In doing so, that would allow them to fully supply Hamilton and some of the other parking systems more on a regional basis. But that could be 10 years away. They have an existing charter in place that allows them to sell water right now to Wenham and Hamilton, along with Salem and Beverly, so they could supplement Hamilton and Wenham without any further legislation. If they were to supply the other parking systems, which Essex, Manchester, Topsfield, then there would be some discussion about getting some new legislation in place, so they would have to change the charter. I'm not sure what we had anything to that. I don't know if there's anything else about discussing. That's about my opinion. And then we also we reviewed the finished water quality in terms of what impacts there would be from blending the sources of Salem, Beverly, and Hamilton, and the other parking water systems. So Salem, Beverly, and Hamilton are pretty compatible in terms of water quality. They both use similar chemicals for disinfection and fluoridation. They both use ultraply phosphate for corrosion control. So they're pretty compatible. So we didn't really see an issue in blending the two supplies. As far as the parking water systems go, again, they're all pretty compatible. They all use the same type of chemicals and same type of treatment practices. The only exception would be Essex. Essex doesn't add phosphate for their corrosion control, so that have to be investigated a little further to see what impacts that might have if they're going to be using this blended source. And that's just a table showing a summary of the information that we get for Salem, Beverly, and each one of the parking water systems with regard to pH, chlorine, phosphates, THMs. So the only possible concern might be with blended supplies is the PFAS. I'm sure everybody's heard that term. So right now, I think Salem, Beverly is pretty low. Hamilton's pretty low, so School Street, but that's offline. But the Island of Bellfield is pretty low. Some of the other parking systems have had some spikes here and there, so PFAS, but I think they've since come down. So we don't anticipate an issue, but again, we need to talk to Mass DEP to see what they're going to allow, bringing people at high PFAS levels at the system that are a little, that's kind of irregular. We're going to need to investigate that a little bit. And as far as getting water from Hamilton into the other communities, so right now Hamilton has existing connections with Essex, Ipswich, and Wenham. You can see that map up there, that kind of shows where they are. So Wenham has two interconnections, one on Howard Street and one on River Street. Ipswich has one on Waldingfield Road, and Essex has two on Essex Street. Right now, there are no interconnections with Topsfield or Manchester, so if Hamilton wanted to if they wanted to take access supply for Hamilton and or South Beverly, then we'd have to install some new pipelines, which we'll talk about in the next tasks. So just a quick summary. So based on the system gradients of all the communities that participated in the study, Hamilton could feed 150 gallons to 200 gallons a minute into those communities of Ipswich and Wenham by gravity. So because the gradients are pretty even, as you can see from the chart there. Hamilton has a little higher gradient, so a pump station. Essex has a little higher gradient than Hamilton. Excuse me. So they would need a booster pump station for that. And those connections have to be equipped with new meters and possibly backup preventive valves, depending on how we use those interconnections. And like I mentioned, any connection with Topsfield, Manchester, we're going to need booster pumps because they're at a much higher gradient than we are, and also a new pipeline to connect the systems. So that was task 3. What are you doing for time? Pretty good. Am I going too fast? Okay. Task 4 was evaluating the interconnection with Manchester. Again, the scope very similar to what we did for Salem Beverly. We reviewed their water supply system, evaluated pipeline routes to connect with them, looked at their water supply availability, water quality impacts, and infrastructure upgrades to connect. As I said before, there's no direct connection with Manchester, so we need a new pipeline to connect. So, in talking with Tim and the town in Manchester, sitting down and having some discussions, the most preferable alignment really to connect the two systems is along Tobacco Road and Hamilton. Right, and so that would be, so to connect the two, we suggested a 12-inch main from Hamilton's 8, and we run down Tobacco Road all the way to Manchester's plant, which is actually in Hamilton. And like I said, based on Manchester's gradients, we would need a PRB because they're considerably higher than Hamilton. And that shows the route of the pipeline. So the red is where Hamilton's existing system ends. And we'll start at Tobacco Road. We're going to continue that with the 12-inch all the way to the plant at the end of on the town line there. So again, we did some hydraulic analysis to determine, what supply rates we could transfer back and forth. Under the same scenarios, with Manchester supplementing Hamilton and also Manchester fully supplying Hamilton. Again, for scenario 1, we could get rates up to 300 gallons a minute to supplement Hamilton with minimal impact to the current operations. Under scenario 2, with Manchester fully supplying Hamilton, we could get rates up to 800 gallons a minute with the new PIV set at a certain gradient, 235 feet. However, since that's so much higher than the gradient now that Hamilton runs on, that would really isolate the existing tank, the round sewer reservoir. So for that scenario, the Hamilton would have to build a new taller tank. Otherwise, they wouldn't have any storage. So that could be an issue. And this is just a quick cost summary of those two scenarios. So install 900 feet of new 12-inch with the appurtenance that we needed. That was $5.5 million. And for scenario 2, the same pipeline, but because we need to build a new tank, that would cost about $4 million. So that increases that scenario cost quite a bit. So as far as assessing Manchester's water supply, so they have a current registered water management act withdrawal of 0.72. They're in the North Coast basin, so different basin. They have a maximum pump capacity of 4.97 MGD. Their current average day and max day demands right now are 0.628 and 1.4. And they're estimated to increase to 0.62, which is almost the same, and 2.03. So based on their supply needs and their current withdrawal allocations, they would have a future surplus of only 0.10 MGD to supply Hamilton and the other parking system. However, Manchester has been battling a pretty high on pound-for water, so if they can reduce that a little bit, that might increase the surplus to 0.18 MGD, which is a little bit more, but that's not really enough to really fully supply Hamilton department systems. But I mean, that surplus could allow Hamilton to possibly reduce use of its Highway number 2 well, which is the worst well in terms of water quality. So that might help. But also reduce some hydrology into the river basin since they're in a different basin altogether. But as I said, they wouldn't have any available surplus to supply any of the other parking water system. They'd be strictly just to supplement Hamilton. And again, if they wanted to fully supply Hamilton, which they can hydraulically, but unfortunately they would need to get an increase in their WMA withdrawals, which is highly unlikely given the stress, and then and they need to increase them almost by double, which is probably not going to happen. So some of the water supply permitting considerations that will be evaluated, as I said, they're in the north coastal watershed, which is designated as a category 4 basin, so it's already considered stressed and somewhat depleted. You know, any effort to increase those withdrawals would require additional analysis, some additional permitting. We also need an Interbasin Transfer Act permit because they're in a different watershed. So the transfer of water from one basin to another, you need a permit, you need approval from DEP to do that as well. So in conclusion, given all these issues that we identified, and in connection with Manchester, we really don't need a short-term solution. Really wouldn't address a long-term solution for Hamilton or the other parking water systems. Review of finished water quality. So it's very similar to Task 3. Manchester, again, they're compatible with Hamilton in terms of water quality. No real issues. Both have some occasional elevated PFAS levels. I think they're addressing theirs as well, so I don't see an issue with that. In the parking water system, again, they're all compatible, fortunately, so we don't see no concern. Again, except for Essex, they need to look at, maybe adding phosphate to their system. As far as infrastructure needs to supply the other parking system from Hamilton, again, it's very similar. Existing connection with Ipswich and Wenham can be used to provide up to 20 gallons a minute. There would be a booster pump needed to supply Essex through Hamilton. And right now, like I said before, Hamilton does not have a connection with Topsfield, so they would be have to have a booster pump and a new pipeline to feed them. So that was it for Task 4. So Task 5, we looked at sharing supply between Hamilton, Ipswich, Wenham, Topsfield, Manchester on a mutual aid basis, not so much to fully supply, but in case a well goes down or there's an emergency, is there supply available to kind of move that around so they can address a short-term shortage. So again, similar to what we did for Task 3 and 4, we evaluated the existing water system infrastructure, looked at available WMA allocations and supply, identified some surplus for sharing between the systems, some permitting considerations with that, water quality impacts from sharing supply, and any needed infrastructure upgrades and costs, and also looked at a new pipeline to connect Topfield to him. This is a quick overview of each one of the towns. So Ipswich has water supplies within both the Parker River Basin and the Ipswich River Basin. WMA allocation in Parker River is 0.98 and Ipswich is 0.2. So their total allocation is 1.18 million gallons per day. They have a max pump capacity of 3.67. So their current, their current average daily demand right now is 1.01. So they have a current surplus of 0.17 MGD to share. Essex has 3 wells within the North Coastal Basin. Their allocation is 0.22. They have a max capacity of 1.0. Their average daily demand was 0.201. So their surplus right now, current is only 0.019 MGD. Wenham is in the Ipswich River Basin, similar to Hamilton. Their WMA allocation is 0.9. Their max pump capacity is 1.48. Their average day demand 2021 was 0.26 MGD. So they have a current surplus of 0.03. Topsfield, they're in the Ipswich River Basin. They have a WMA allocation of 0.43 MGD. Their current average day demand was 0.393, so they have a surplus of 0.037. and Hamilton has an allocation of 1.03, they can pump it at 0.93. Their average day demand was 0.56, so they have a surplus in supply of 0.315, but we'll talk about later on why that really is not a surplus, because they really can't access that because of the, between the water quality and the production capacity, the plant is really not accessible. So looking at the crucial supply estimates, so this is a table that was taken out the task 6 report. I don't know if you can read that. So it just kind of summarizes kind of what I talked about each one of the communities, and also projects. So we talked about the existing average day demand. So for the communities, we projected up to 2040, 2035, some communities, as to what their future needs would be and what the surplus would be. So from this table, there's not much surplus available between each one of the water systems. Most of them will be right after the WMA allocation. Some are going to be over in the next 20 years. So really, in terms of being able to share water between the systems, based on the WMA allocation, there's not much really to share. I mean, there could be some sharing done during some of the lower demand periods where, the average day demand is much less, so there could be some surplus there. But as far as having something that's consistent and that you can count on, there's really not going to be any surplus. So that's kind of what I said here, that there's a minimal to share on the current demands, and on the future demands there won't be any. Like I said, Hamilton, even though there's a surplus per the allocation, it's limited due to the water quality of the wells and what the plant can treat and meet the regulations that they need to meet. And that's why we're here today. We're trying to find other sources of water, because we know that supply is not really, it's not sustainable. There's going to be some issues later on. Like I said before, there could be some sharing possibly during the low demand periods. If there's an emergency, if someone well goes out in October or December, there could be some water that can be wheeled between the systems, but something that you need to count on a routine basis. It's really not going to be there. That's kind of what we said on the end. As far as sharing water between the water systems, so Hamilton, Wenham, and Topsfield are in the Ipswich River Basin, so sharing water between those systems really would be governed by the WMA and requirements, which should be minor. It should be allowable. Essex and Ipswich are in, both the harbor and North Coastal. So sharing supply between them, again, would probably require inter-basin transfer act permits, so there'd be some permitting hurdles to kind of go over that if you wanted to share water between those systems. And again, and just a couple of things to note, sharing supply between systems within the same basin, obviously limited to the WMA allocations. So, I mean, towns can share, but they can't exceed their allocations. They have to stay under that. And if systems, and I guess the main question that I'll make talk about this, but the systems do exceed their WMA withdrawal, excuse me. The receiving systems will probably have to reduce that by the same amount to kind of keep the full withdrawal from the same. We can't exceed the safe field of the road. Review of the finished water quality from task 3. Again, all the systems are really compatible in terms of water quality. They all really use the same treatment practice, so you see no issues. PFOS again is elevated, and there's some elevated PFOS in all the systems. So it's a concern, but I don't see it as a showstopper. Again, I'll have to review the DEP to see kind of what they feel about sharing water that has elevated PFOS. Again, infrastructure needs similar to task 3 and 4. Hamilton already has a connection with Ipswich and Wenham, and those can be used as is. Essex will need a booster pump station because they're at high gradients. And again, one thing we really need to look at is the future connection with Topsfield, because right now there's no connection between Topsfield and Hamilton. So we did look at some pipeline options, looking at the systems and where they are physically. We identified Asbury Street as the most favorable alignment to connect the two systems. That would require about 6,500 feet of new 8-inch main to do that. And because Topsfield's at a higher gradient than Hamilton, they would need a PIV to supply Hamilton, and conversely, Hamilton would need a pump station to pump water into Topsfield. That's a layout with that red is the new pipeline option, which is on Asbury Street. Again, we did some hydraulic analysis to see what we could get in terms of rates through that pipeline. We could deliver 200 gallons to 30 gallons a minute into Hamilton with minimal impact. The new booster pump station to get water into Topsfield would have to be rated for at least 350, at about a head of 80 feet, given the current gradient. And then this is just a table that shows the cost of all the infrastructure needs that would be needed to share supply between Wenham, Ipswich, Essex, and Topsfield. So the total for Wenham and Ipswich would be very similar. So the interconnection will be used as is. Just we need a new revenue meter and some controls for the meter. This is the cost for Essex, which we need a pump station. That's why it's a little bit more. And then Topsfield interconnection would be $3.6 million. That would be for the pipeline, the booster pump station, as well as the PRV vault to supply between the systems. Okay, so task 6 was the overall final report, which kind of took all task 3, 4, and 5 and kind of summarized it into one document. So these are just some of the goals that we did for task 6. So it really it's a summary of the whole project. So we evaluated alternative sources for Hamilton to address its water supply limitations, including looking at Salem River, the Water Supply Board, and Manchester as alternate sources. We identified any available surplus between power and water systems that can be shared to mitigate some short-term supply shortages, estimated the supply rates that can be delivered between the systems. We determined the infrastructure upgrades, evaluated the water quality impacts, and then we also developed the infrastructure costs and a phased implementation plan that Hamilton can follow depending on how they want to proceed. So the conclusions of all this, Salem River Water Supply Board does have some limited surplus available under their current WMA registration to supplement Hamilton. And then with activating their WMA permit allocation, they could have available surplus to fully supply Hamilton and some of the other parking water systems. But again, that would be contingent on them upgrading their plant back to the 24-inch D. As you mentioned, right now their capacity plant meets their maximum day, so they really don't have a lot of surplus for those high demand periods. Manchester has limited surplus under its current WMA allocations. Wouldn't be able to supply Hamilton fully in the future. And the parking water systems also have limited surplus really to share under their current WMA allocations in the future. So, in increasing current WMA allocations within any of the basins that we talked about is highly unlikely given their condition and the fact that they're stressed already. Based on all this, the new interconnection with Salem River, the water supply board, seems to be the most feasible as a short-term and long-term solution to meet the future water supply needs of Hamilton and the parking water systems. And an option A pipeline right now is recommended as the most favorable alignment, but again, we need to do some additional investigation to make sure that that's actually true. So as far as the recommendations go, we need to conduct additional analysis to confirm the most cost-effective pipeline route, whether it's A or B. We need to design and construct a new pipeline along the final alignment to connect Hamilton to Salem Beverly. Obviously, this is a discussion with Salem Beverly Water to see if they're going to agree to that and what some of the terms and conditions would be. We need to upgrade the existing connection with Wenham, Ipswich, and Essex for sharing future supply. The future pipeline with Topsfield, we had it in the report, really more for Topsfield than for the Senate Task Force. It doesn't really benefit Hamilton from a supply standpoint because Topsfield doesn't have any surplus really to share. Neither does Hamilton and the rest of the parking systems, but it's something they wanted to put in the report because we know Senate Task Force is going to look at that, and that might be something that they want to consider from for a long-term solution for the whole region. We need to do some additional analysis to determine what the impacts would be to Hamilton and Salem Beverly's water system if we were to supply Hamilton fully from Salem Beverly. The analysis we did was really for some of the smaller flows. We didn't have any models of any of the systems that we worked with, so we really couldn't see what the impacts were in their system specifically. So if we decide to go full supply option, then we'd have to look at that real close and see exactly what impacts might be in those systems. So, based on those recommendations, we developed a phase implementation plan for the town of Hamilton to consider, and we grouped those recommendations into 3 categories. Initial, which would be 0 to 3 years. These are to address Hamilton's current supply issues. Short term, 3 to 5 years. That would improve the ability to share water between the parking water systems. And long term, which would be 5 to 15 years. That would be if Hamilton wanted to go that route of having Salem Beverly fully supply them and the other parking water systems. And that recommendation would be done in parallel with Salem Beverly's plan upgrades, so that they would have the capacity and the supply to do that. And this is just an overview of the implementation plan and the costs associated with each one of the recommendations. So the short-term cost would be roughly just over $7 million. I'm sorry, the initial water supply cost would be just over $7 million. The short-term would be about 1.57 million, and the long-term would be about 4.3 million. And I know there's a lot of information. I apologize for going so fast. And with that, take some questions and answers. Yes?
Excuse me. I have a question and a comment. The question is, I recall years ago, there was talk about building a reservoir somewhere. Was that?
Yep.
Was that considered as part of this, or and I think it was going to be in Topsfield?
Yeah. No, we didn't consider that as part of this study. This was just to look at Hamilton and the parking system's current and future supply needs and looking at either Salem, Beverly, or Manchester as an alternate source. We didn't look at that's more for the task force, but we would be looking into that. We'll be looking at NWA long-term and the reservoir long-term. That was something that was not beyond the scope. We didn't look at that one. But it will be evaluated at some point, right?
My comment is, if we ever did option A, I guess it's go big or go home, 12 to 15 years ago, we looked at the possibility of, Hamilton looked at the possibility of running a sewer line to Beverly to serve the downtown area. And I guess if we're going to dig up the roads to hook up for water, why not do it for sewer too? So that's, spend a few more $1 million.
Yeah, it's just money anyway.
Yeah, I'm a big feeling guy.
Oh, we'll take that up. That's a good plan. You're going to do that, and you're going to do one of the other if it's feasible. I don't know where that stands with Salem Beverly in terms of accepting sewer, but that's something we can
throw it out.
Discuss. I appreciate that. Yes. Oh, wait. Sorry. Okay.
Somewhere in the set of information that has appeared with this report, I believe I recall that Senator Tarr has constructed this compact of, it must be dozens of towns and government organizations. And do I understand correctly, for anything like option A happen, for example, would that require all of these entities to say yes?
I'll let you answer that.
The group of communities has been working together, and we're working on a compact agreement that currently is saying that recommendations out of that group should be unanimous. But my reading of it, and something I have to confirm in the next several days because we're supposed to meet again on September 28th. My understanding of the agreement is that agreeing to work together and make recommendations as a group doesn't eliminate our ability to act individually. And, quite frankly, I'm not sure I'd sign the compact if it restricts me from being able to act in the best interest of the town of Hamilton. So we're looking to try to be on the same page. The fact of the matter is, all the towns and state agencies and the nonprofits like Irwa that are at the table in this compact recognize that water sustainability isn't a local issue that any of us can solve on our own. So we want to move forward together, understanding that there's going to be need for agreement amongst us, that we all have to give a little for all of us to benefit in terms of working together, not just going out for our own interests. But we also have to take care of the people that we represent here in Hamilton or Ipswich. So I'm going to be working with the Senator's office to clarify decisions that come out of the compact have to be unanimous, but that does not restrict us from being able to act in our own best interest.
So theoretically then, if that is the case, it does appear that option A would be attractive, I guess you could say. If option A is, let's say, adopted, does that mean that Hamilton's pump station drawing water from the well field by the Ipswich River would be turned off?
I think ultimately, I think that's probably the long-term solution. That's not something we can get to in the next 5 years, probably. But yeah, but part of the trade-off there would be if we agree to go into Salem Beverly Water and we run the pipe and Salem Beverly agrees to take us on as a customer, we give up our registration use, and it would be, and a portion of it could accrue to Salem Beverly so that they could continue to serve the larger area. We wouldn't be increasing the withdrawal from the river, maybe hopefully decreasing the withdrawal in the best interest of the river, but at the same time providing a more sustainable future for us, ourselves, hopefully whatever other partners join us. So there's already a strong belief that the river is overdrawn as it is, so we don't want to do anything that increases withdrawals. If we can partner in ways that will allow us to decrease withdrawals, and you mentioned the reservoir idea, that's the Salem Beverly Water Supply Board issue. They own the land in Topsfield. That's their idea for their future sustainability. It would work well for this type of partnership because it would allow us to draw water from the river when it's high and store it for times of the year when it's lower. That would give them a way to ensure that they could meet other towns' needs if they take other towns' needs on. But as Peter mentioned in the study, Salem Beverly already has a $50 million improvement plan without the reservoir that they have to try to fund. So, you know, how and the timing of all these things getting built is, you know, we're in the first steps of that.
Peter, I was interested in something about the Salem Beverly Water Board supply. I wasn't aware of this until I read the report, but there are apparently 3 reservoirs from which the water board draws, and also some wells from which it withdraws.
They have a diversion from the river that during certain times of the year, they're allowed to divert certain flow to maintain the storage levels in the reservoirs, correct? So I don't believe it's wells, but it's right from the river itself. They divert it. There's a pump station that I think maintains the Wenham Reservoir, the main one, the plan is off.
Do you have a sense of what fraction of their supply comes from 3 reservoirs?
I do. It's in the task 3 report. I don't remember off the top of my head, but there's a little pie chart that kind of shows what each reservoir contributes, as well as the Ipswich River diversion.
Okay.
We can get that too, but it's the task 3 level. Well, actually, that's attached to the task 6 report.
Okay.
It's probably on the website, so it's in there. I don't know exactly what the top of my head what it is. I didn't bring it with me, so I apologize. But it's in there. It's in the task.
I'm familiar with 2 of those reservoirs. I drive past them a lot, but I never quite realized until reading the report that they serve the Salem Beverly Water Board as major supplies.
They're only, yeah, and they're right at the right next to the winter line office at that part of Beverly, which is pretty close to Hamilton, which is another reason why we consider them as an alternative source, because it's right there. It seems to make sense.
Okay.
Dan, you got a question? Oh.
Well, it's partially been answered, but I guess just long term, you know, my understanding is since Beverly Salem Water Board does divert water from the Ipswich River into the Wenham Reservoir, you know, long term, is this really going to be a solution for water needs in this area, or are we still going to be, you know, all together?
Still needs a based.
Some new limitations, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll let Wayne answer that from a permeance perspective. I mean, I can have an answer, but let me see what he wants to say.
I think yes and no, it's gonna depend on what societal choices we make. Theoretically, certainly from our perspective, converting summertime groundwater withdrawals to stored winter withdrawals or diversions is preferable. So the more we can switch to reservoirs helps the river within the existing use. So that's a benefit. And there's less environmental impact using reservoir water. So increasing allocations from the river through diversions and wintertime pumping is probably feasible. So yes, we could probably live on existing water supplies if we convert from well water to surface water. And then couple that with better conservation. Very few towns actually in Ipswich conserve at all. You know, Hamilton, Wenham, and Ipswich are the exception, not the rule. And if everybody conserved like Hamilton does, there'd be a huge amount of extra water available. So that's where, you know, if we collectively make decisions to go that route, we could live within the existing Ipswich allocations if we wanted to.
I could just tell us a quick story to build on that. Probably 2 or 3 years ago, we were leaving winter, coming into spring, and we had a decent amount of snowfall, and the river was running pretty high, and then we had, I don't know, 4 or 5 days of like really heavy downpours, and the water was just flowing out of the Ipswich River. And it was going right out of the river into the Atlantic Ocean. We had no ability to capture it anywhere and hold on to it. 4 weeks later, we were in water restrictions in Hamilton because it had stopped raining, and the river went down. So the idea would be to have these options to be able to store that water when it's high, and it won't hurt the river. And so that when it stops raining and we get to the heat of the summer, we'd still have the water that we need.
And that's great as long as we get the snowfall, but you know, when we have a drought like
Yeah.
this, there's no guarantee that we're gonna make it up this winter, right?
Absolutely,
So
right.
there's still.
I'm hopeful. I'm ever the optimist. I think we're gonna have a really bad one this year.
I'm hopeful, we really need it, but, you know, it's not a guarantee that just because we're pulling winter water, that there's gonna be winter water.
Agreed. You went first.
So, does Salem Beverly have any options other than the Ipswich River? Do they have an MWRA connection, for example?
Again, that's something that the task force is going to be looking at in terms of, you know, what the feasibility of having MWRA come up here on a long-term, you know, basis, and, you know, if they come up here, you know, how are they going to connect to Salem Beverly, and then that's going to be the supply point. Are they going to go into, you know, I think they just started looking at this, to be honest with you, so it's probably a few years away before they have a good sense of what they want to do, or what they can do. But, I mean, I know, like I said, the task force will be looking at that. I know that everybody's interested in coming up here, I can tell you that. What that means in terms of a timeline, I mean.
Now, this is one of 3 studies going on together to answer the big question.
Right.
So this is really how we're going to move the water around. And the task force, which we've talked about a lot, is looking about where we're going to get additional water from outside the Ipswich River. And they're starting their studies right now. It's actually in a quicker time frame. Maybe as early as late winter and spring.
Yeah.
We'll have those answers. And then third, the MWRA, which I think we all know is the Greater Boston System, is doing their own studies how to get their water up here as well. So collectively, between the 3 studies, the long-term sustainability and issues will be addressed. And then it'll be up to all of us to pick the best one.
Hey, just real quick, part of the reason too for doing the study is the supply, but it's also our local water system needs future improvements. You know, capital improvements is a great deal. We have a water report that's a couple years old now that casts out for the next 5 to 10 years improvements that we need to make the system if we stay out on our own. And it's millions of dollars. I think it's $7 million just to do a new tank on the top of Browns Hill, which we need anyway. And some of these solutions are $7 million. So we're trying to make a decision, is it better to, where should we spend our money? Should we continue to sink money into our own system that might ultimately have to go away anyway, just because of supply issues? Or is it better for us to now start the groundwork to partner with other communities so that we make the investments there, and then when those supply issues or supply questions have been answered, we'll be ready to go. So it's a balancing act. We need to continue, we're doing the pre-treatment plant right now. We have to, because we have PFAS concerns, and that plant's going to continue to provide our water for the next 5 years or more. So we need to make that upgrade. but it's $2+ million project. How much more do we want to keep putting in there when we also need to replace pipes in the street? So it's trying to balance those needs as well.
Yeah, but no, in this study, hopefully, you know, if and when we do some of the recommendations or improvements, you know, if Andrew does come up here at some point in 5 years, the infrastructure, some of it will be in place already, so to make that decision to go, it will be shorter time frame to get that in place. Because some of these things, these pipelines, you know, Hamilton's connected to 4 different communities, so if we get water into Hamilton, then we can certainly feed everybody else. So that's kind of, that's why the task force kind of was interested in our study, because they'll take the study and then use that to, you know, as a bigger picture. Okay, if Enderbury comes here, you know, we can get the water here, we can get it everywhere. And then they have something to kind of shoot for. But again, yeah, probably 5 years plus out before that. And again, the other driver for this study was, yes, we're looking at a regional because obviously we want to partner with people, but Hamilton is somewhat unique between everybody else up here because their water quality, the wells, you know, it's not great, obviously, you know, and the plant is running good, but it's maxing out, and we're concerned that, you know, another 5 years, what happens if we lose a well? I mean, there's no resiliency, there's no redundancy here. If we lose out of a well field, there's no water. So we're looking at also to have another source of water that we needed in an emergency. And Salem Beverly is the only one that really has any surplus, as we said. None of the systems really have enough to sustain the loss of the well for a long period of time. So that's another issue. You know, we want to make sure that you guys have water, and we need to do something with this. There's an option that we can consider. So that's
We're actually looking at that as a separate task. So Peter and I met with
Yes.
Wenham and looking to, as more of an emergency approach. If we have issues with our well sources, how do we get to a source that can provide us that water fairly quickly? So that's another whole separate kind of task we're running right now, just to have that as, you know, standard operating procedures in place, as well as the conversations with Salem Beverly on if we need it in an emergency case, how do we get that here quickly, as well as everybody on the same page, understanding what the requirements, procedures, if there's any costs associated with that, everything's in place to do that, just as a backup for emergency source. So.
Heather, I think you had it right there.
Yep, I did. Some of it's been answered in the time I was waiting. I think Wayne said that we didn't look at the issue of extraction from Manchester because it's going to be covered in the next study. Because I was wondering when you were doing it, we didn't talk about mutual aid through Manchester. We didn't really talk about exploring the North Coastal Basin.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the first part of your question.
In the towns that you were laying out for
Yes.
mutual aid, you did not have Manchester as one of the towns. And I was
We
curious
looked at, we looked at Manchester as a possible interconnection with Hamilton to supply Hamilton and maybe some other of the communities. But given the length of the pipeline to connect, when we did task fires by mutual aid, we didn't look at them because they're not connected and we're not going to, and they have no surplus really to share.
Neither was Topsfield. I mean, Topsfield has this gigantic.
Yeah, right, but but Topsfield, the pipeline was in there just because of we're not recommending that Hamilton build a pipeline to Topsfield. We put it in there so when the task force takes our study, there's an option for them to get Topsfield in the mix, but you're right,
To me, it seems like if you're going to do Topsfield, you should have done Manchester, so that's why.
well, we did, we evaluated both of them, we just didn't recommend to build a pipeline for.
But not for mutual aid, I didn't see Manchester listed.
No, because right now, they're not connected. In Topsfield, we only looked at that as an option for the task force to consider and to see, you know, is it worthwhile, you know, at the time we did it, we didn't know what, we evaluated their supply, their needs, and they don't have much surplus, so we didn't recommend Topsfield to build a pipeline, but we included it just so the task force sees that if they wanted to, you know, have a regional approach, this is something that they can consider. We didn't recommend Hamilton to build a pipeline. We just evaluated it, just like we evaluated Manchester's pipeline, and we don't think it's feasible, and we didn't recommend to do it.
So, and one of the options was not to look at the North Coastal Basin, you know, as far as the source.
Well, that would be Manchester, and again, the North Coastal Basin is also stressed on category 4 or 5, so pulling additional water into that, and Manchester doesn't have the allocation provided. They're at their cap now.
Well, I mean, some of Hamilton is also the North Coastal Basin, so.
Hamilton, not the supplies, no. Yes, the geographic town is, but the supplies are in Ipswich River. So they don't, right now they're both pictures.
Okay.
Right.
Well, my real question, that just kind of came up,
Okay.
but my real question was about the infrastructure improvements,
Yep.
0 to 3 years.
And didn't we do But didn't we do test wells in the Northern Coastal Basin?
We did.
And they
Yeah, we
came-
tried. We put
they
it
came
down.
up
They were
dry.
not good tests. So therefore, I'm not sure we did a full enough study on that.
We did some
I
test wells.
defer to your expertise. That's
Well, I was deferring to Dave Thompson, who has a lot of expertise in that area.
You got another question? I'm sorry.
Yes, the infrastructure improvements that you show in here, 0 to 3 years,
Yep.
those would only be if we're moving forward with your preferred option.
That would be to get Hamilton connected to Salem Beverly, so we could supplement Hamilton if we need to, given the quality and condition of their wells. Well, Hamilton. So that would be the initial one, to get that pipeline in place. So we would have an emergency backup, or we have a source of supply that we could.
That
we
would
could
still,
rely
entail us running our water treatment plant. and things like
Right,
that.
and it
Current
just be-
operation,
Right.
that would just be as another source.
So all of these charges that are on here would only be if we connected to Salem Beverly.
For
Sorry, say
the
that.
first,
Yeah, the first 0 to 3 years is all because.
it's just, I think it's the project that costs about $7 million.
Yep, yeah, well, I'm looking at the numbers that I know we have for infrastructure improvements elsewhere, like Joe alluded to, you know, Browns Hill and all of that.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
I'm just
Yep,
looking
so
at the
that-
numbers in my head.
Yep, and that's what I think, as Joe mentioned earlier, I mean, we have, right now, we have a certain amount of work ahead of us to sustain our current source, our current Hamilton infrastructure.
Right.
And that is down the road, in capital planning, it's $1 million for a new tank and possibly a second tank, some additional pipeline, plant upgrades, well redevelopments. So there's a lot of money.
None of that is reflected in this table.
Right.
No, this is looking at
Okay,
getting water
I just
from.
wanted to clarify that.
Yep, that is correct. Yep,
That's an
that's
additional
a separate.
$7 to $10 million.
To sustain, if we're going to keep separate, Hamilton separate from a regional solution.
But there'd be some amount of upgrades we'd have to do if we connected to any of these towns. Might not.
The first upgrade, there would be a minimal PRV needed, obviously some additional.
For people who don't know, like me, what's a PRP?
Oh, I'm sorry, pressure reducing valve.
Thank you.
Because they're at a higher gradient, so if you open up without a PRV, it would flood, it would overflow the tank, and we'd have pressure
Booster
breaks,
station.
pressure spikes, so we try to man.
So-
The PRV is there, so it maintains the gradient that you see now in your tank.
I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think the first option, the initial, would be obviously a connection to Salem Beverly, but it would be minimal improvements to our current infrastructure.
That's
Right.
what I wanted to hear.
Yeah, that short term would just to connect, and you will still run your system as is, but if you needed additional supply, if the plant was down for a day, or if you lost a well, if a well was being redeveloped,
Right.
you needed 200 gallons a minute, you can open up.
Yeah, that doesn't mean there won't be infrastructure needs in the
Yes,
future.
yeah.
That would not require that, to do that project. Not saying other needs won't happen.
And that's the first step, because until Salem Beverly upgrades the plant, they really can't commit to anything more than.
They can't commit to more than the short term.
Right.
0 to 3 years, because they can't supply that much water. And then this group of under here is for after we're connected to Salem Beverly. This is so that we can provide water to Wenham or Ipswich or Essex. So those are regional costs, not necessarily Hamilton's costs, but things that would need to be picked up in order to expand the region.
Where are we in our conversations with Salem Beverly?
Where
Where are we in conversations with Salem Beverly?
Well, they got the report, they read it, they commented on it, they seem to be in agreement to what we're stating. We haven't really sat down with them and say, okay, we would like to do, option A. Can we do it, and what do you want us to do, and, are you okay with that?
They're very aware
Right.
of that we were conducting this
Yeah.
study and looking, obviously, as Peter mentioned, they read the report.
Right.
We've had.
We met with them several
Met
times.
with them a few times. They understood what our goals were here.
They're also involved in the task force study, so they're obviously, they're one of the big players in all this, so they're certainly involved.
I don't want to speak for them, so, they've been good conversations, productive conversations, not positive conversations, so, but I don't want to speak for them and say that, oh, we're moving toward an agreement yet. I think that our goals align. It's, now the next step is seeing, kind of where the larger region wants to go, because you know, that for our first step up there is probably also the first step for the larger region if the larger region is going to move forward. So the idea is to try to get as many of these folks to come along with us on this trip, so that we're not, you know, foisting it all in the bags of Hamilton ratepayers, right? We're finding, you know, help from the state, help from the other partnering communities, and doing it together, so.
And we're a key piece, Hamilton obviously geographically is in the middle. So if they can get the water, then we can branch out. Obviously, that's what the short-term upgrades to our connections and things like that are. So we're kind of the key piece in the puzzle for this region to bring the water to.
Well, Kristen Castle, behind first, sorry.
No, just, you've answered a lot of my questions, but, I mean, it seems like that connection is just critical. It's all of these scenarios, that connection seems like one that should be moving forward at a size that's big enough for future development. But when you're talking about kind of a separate project for emergency hookup, but as we're talking about summer storage and reservoir space, is there enough water in reservoirs in Salem Beverly, so Hamilton, if we did hook up to Salem Beverly before this longer term, that we could use some of the water from the reservoirs in the summer instead of drawing directly from the river?
So based on their WMA withdrawal, registered withdrawals, they have surplus available. Obviously, certain times of the year, the plant right now is pumping at their max capacity, just like Hamilton does to kind of keep up demands.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not going to be available 12 months out of the year, but because of the plant, not so much because of the supply, but because of the plant limitation. So, but for 8 months of the year, when the demands are not at peak, there will be some surplus available.
Because my question was, is the supply safe yield of the river or ability to treat? So therefore, if we built the pipe in Hamilton, and not done the region yet, but
Right.
Hamilton wanted to use the water from Salem Beverly in the summer without building the, because there are
Right.
$50 million plants also down the road, or $50 million plant.
Right. Yep. I understand.
Is that something that's been factored in to take a little bit of stress off the direct?
Well, that's what we're hoping, that's why we looked at it, and again, I mean, we talked to Salem Beverly, and, you know, they seem to be okay with at least providing some supplemental supply. We haven't really get into the nitty-gritty as to, okay, when, you know, is it only available from July to August? We don't know that.
Yeah.
Our hope is that it will be available for most of the year, because I don't think they really operate at 16 MGD, you know, for a long period of time. It's probably July, maybe some August.
Those are discussions, obviously, we
Yeah.
have numbers that we're working off of,
Yeah.
but those would be discussions with the board as you get into more details with availability and timeline and when it's more available than other time.
But you're right, because the reservoir, we didn't look at the reservoir levels to see where they are at certain times of the year. We just looked at the allocations, this is what they have that they can pull, here's what their needs are, here's some extra, some surplus. We can get it here, now we can talk to them and find out, well, when is it available based on you guys meeting your needs? And usually for reservoirs, you can overpump a little bit, as well as you really can, but well, there's some storage there, so if they had a 14 MGD demand, and we needed like a couple hundred gallons a minute, I'm sure they could pump the reservoirs, a little bit more. But again, it's the plant that's really the limiting factor.
And where is this report landing in timeline of the DEP allocation, the DEP permits for drawing for all these towns?
I defer to Wayne on that one.
Yeah,
That got
that's this
delayed.
year, so they're gonna renew all the Ipswich permits this year. It's been delayed, they were supposed to be out by now, but I think they're saying fall now.
So next week?
Tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm just curious about the
Okay.
connection between the draw limits and what that internal conversation is going to be. And I know that's not an answerable question.
No support.
Yeah, have you gone around yet to talk about how costs will be shared or impacted with other towns?
The flip answer is that's why we're participating with Senator Tar's group. I know. We recognize that, again, that's part of the reason the whole task force is together. We want the group to come together and work on these things together. The costs are extraordinary. $7 million just to give Hamilton supplemental supply a couple times a year, but probably isn't worth it, but if it's working toward a more permanent goal and other communities can benefit from it, that's probably something we can get the state to participate in. That's our goal, that's our hope. But this, the state's going to do a cost-benefit analysis. They're not going to invest $7 million in something that just helps Hamilton. So that's why we're working together. Josh?
Yeah, I like the idea of reservoirs and sort of capacity, reserve for, tough times. And if there's a surplus of rain or whatever, and that's great. I think that's a good idea. If we can increase that kind of capacity. I do have a concern about, I guess there's talk about if we do join up with Salem and Beverly, it sounds like we'd be possibly completely dependent on that flow of water and be shutting down, you said we'd shut down the local wells.
Well, that's still the determined. We've studied two options here. One is for, for partial supplemental supply, and one is for long-term, full supply. And that's a decision that the select board and the town is going to have to make as it moves forward in the process. But yeah, one of the trade-offs of agreeing to go into Beverly Salem is probably that we give up our own withdrawal.
That was my concern. I would just say, just my
the goal is
opinion
to,
yeah, my opinion is at least to have some self-sufficiency in case, things can go wrong with agreements and technicalities even. That if Hamilton can, at least maybe if we have to temporarily through regulations,
I certainly
do
do.
some withdrawals, but keep the equipment there, keep it ready to go in case there's a problem.
Yeah, I certainly understand the hesitation, but I
I'm
think
not
that
into interdependence too much, and it's not necessary.
I certainly understand the hesitation, but at the same time, I think the town now has 30 years of experience with the MWRA in providing water from one source to dozens of communities. It's like 60-something communities that get water from the MWRA. None of those towns has suffered from being a part of a larger system. And in fact, the individual harms or risks that each town had when they were on their own have been alleviated. So, again, we're not going to solve water sustainability issues by ourselves because the water doesn't just exist in Hamilton or outside Hamilton. We're only going to be able to solve it by working together with other communities. So yeah, there are trade-offs and there's risks, but there's risks to staying on our own as well.
But
if we don't tie in somewhere else, we're completely on our own.
I think also you also have to look at in the future 5 years, you have to weigh the cost of it. We had to spend another $10 million to keep the wells going and connect to someone that's $5 million. When I look at it, worth $10 million just to stay somewhat independent and have a supply that may not be good enough. Again, that's what's driving this. Some of this is that the water quality of the well field is really. It's a concern.
It's been deteriorating.
Right.
You're reconditioning wells almost every year now.
Yeah.
And so
Which is pretty high.
It used to go years in between reconditioning a well. Now it's virtually every year we're reconditioning a well. That's not, that should give us a lot of pause. Yeah.
So, our sources, kind of simplistically looking at this, our sources are declining and our regulations are increasing on water quality and things like that. So we're trying to find that we're meeting all the requirements, but as our sources decline, it's harder and harder to meet demand and the requirements in the water quality, things like that. So it's looking at longer term, bigger picture regional solutions. You got to kind of weigh that all in there as well. If we take wells offline for a period of time and we let our system sit there vacant or not in operation, that could be potentially problematic if we ever need to bring it back online. Chances are we would have to do a lot more improvements to bring it back online at that point. So like Joe was saying, a lot of regional solutions in NWRA or Beverly Salem or whatever, those are basically the two main kind of regional solutions here that we're talking about. A lot of the communities that have came on and partnered with them have kind of closed up and just became a regional, part of the regional solution. Takes away a lot of that commitment and oversight locally, and put, now we're looking at a larger regional program instead of an individual town costs and funding and things like that.
Right. Another thing to consider is that we have two types of infrastructure that we have to maintain currently with the plant and all that goes into pulling the water out of the ground and cleaning it and getting ready to pump it out, and then the infrastructure to disperse it throughout the town. what percentage of our distribution system needs to be upgraded, roughly, at this point?
I would probably say about 60%.
So we've been making these huge monetary investments in the plant because we need to, because we have to keep up with the new regulations on the water quality, and because the sources are deteriorating, so we have to spend money to continue to reinforce those. And that's money we can't spend on upgrading our lines, which are in many cases well over 50 and 60 years old. So those need to be replaced as well. So as long as we're continuing to chase the water supply issue, we're going to make not as much progress as we could on the distribution end. So if we can come to a regional solution on the supply issue, we can focus on our distribution end and only be in one part of the water game eventually.
Well, you're right, I mean, there are pros and cons to, each, being self-sufficient and being, mixed or being totally dependent. I mean, depends how you look at it, depends on the system, but it works for some, and some people don't. But again, to be dependent on someone else, you're talking 5, 10 years away, so it's not gonna happen tomorrow. I mean,
Inclusion in the Beverly Salem Water Supply Board, is that a decision that is made by the board, or would there have to be a municipal vote in Salem and Beverly?
So the board would get, I believe, what I've been told by the executive director there is it would require a vote of their board. It would require a vote of our board, which is in Hamilton, the select board is the water commissioners now, so they'd have to request it. And then the Salem Beverly board would have to vote to do it. But as Peter said at the beginning, Hamilton and Wenham were included in the original charter for Salem and Beverly, so that's all that would be required for our 2 towns to join. The other towns, Manchester, Essex, Topsfield, Ipswich, that would require legislative action because they're not part of the Salem Beverly Water Supply Board's original charter, so they need to be added somehow. But we can join with votes on both sides, and obviously $7 million worth of pipe.
$7 million plus whatever our percentage of new upgrades in the $50 million plan.
Well,
I'm looking at the money.
But let's be honest, that's probably one of the reasons Salem Beverly is willing to talk to us, right? Because they know they got $15 million worth of improvements to make at least, and they have a limited base of customers to take it from. 4 years ago when I got here, and the select board asked me to start looking at ways to solve our long-term water sustainability issues, I put in a call to Salem Beverly, and they didn't even want to return my call. But now they're here, they're talking to us, they understand their need. They have needs, we have needs. That's usually when things get done. Necessity and all, the mother of invention, all that stuff. So.
I didn't realize we were part of the original charter. That's good news.
I didn't either. I was very glad that we did the study because that's when I found out.
Wait,
wow, this is great.
1917 or 13? Hold on, wait,
13.
Before we were.
And that's because their reservoirs are in Hamilton and Wenham, so that there's some benefit to where their sources are.
That makes sense.
Good news for us. Okay, how are we doing? Anybody have any other questions?
Everybody looks tired. You too?
I have a math comment, but it might be too much for everybody.
Oh.
Your long-term total there, you
Is
didn't
wrong?
include the 772 in that bottom number.
Oh,
So
yeah, right.
you only added the 3660 and the 664.
That's wrong too. You're right, even the numbers wrong. What was I doing?
So the
What did you do?
772 is
I don't know.
added later.
That was the night I was going really late, I didn't pay attention.
Yeah,
Right.
just,
We'll fix that.
just math.
You had this to get that because
It's somewhere in the folder, info.
Well, it doesn't have our percentage.
Oh, you were doing your copy. I thought you reviewed it.
It doesn't have the percentage. of
Missed it.
50 million.
You missed it.
I'm human.
all right, I thank everybody for coming. If you have questions you think of, by all means, send them to Public Works Director Tim Olson, and then he'll send them on to Peter, because I don't think you want to hear from me.
I just wanted to, I know Peter, I think Peter or Joe talked about it earlier. The report is on the website. It's under the Water Department. There's the PDF of the report, as well as the video of this presentation will be available on the website via a link that will be uploaded